What's up guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Minecraft Hardcore. Today I'm going to start a giant dwarven cave base underneath my starter house, which is meant to hold up some of the most important farms for building, as well as a breathtaking villager trading hall, and of course some pretty exciting builds. In order not to let you wait so long for the full project getting finalized, I split up the process of building this cave into different modules which will be built in different episodes from now on. So today we start building our dwarven kingdom, and I would say without further ado, let's start building, shall we? Right at the beginning of today's episode, I want to ask you to create a name for our new underground kingdom. I thought about some Lord of the Rings related names, but I want the name to stand for its own a little bit more, so wait for the final result of today's video, and then please feel free to write down your suggestions in the comments. I'd love to see your ideas. So the origin for this idea started back in the days of episode 1, because that's the point where I started figuring out a concept for a trading hall. My villagers served me so well, and I think they deserve a beautiful new space for being held like livestock, I guess. Well, at least they get their own building, right? But it was not as simple as that, because I must admit that I got a little bit sidetracked by the idea of a trading hall, so that we are now here in episode 3 without any OP gear or an elytra yet. I started tackling on this build by digging a simple hole at the spot where I built the staircase down to -57 before. Seeing these recordings again while editing the video really makes me question my life choices, because I know how this entrance is looking right now in real time, and I am so excited to show you guys. After about an hour into digging, I figured out the first shapes of the cave entrance, and I decided to put down some chests for all the materials I gather up in unimaginable amounts, such as cobblestone, normal stone, or dirt and gravel. These chests actually survive the whole process because they are filled up to the rim with stone and stuff. That much I can tell you. One of the next steps for me was to plan out how the actual entrance should look like in the end. I used the materials I had plenty of at this point, and so I went with simple stone bricks, as well as, of course, my favorite block overall in the game, deep slate in all its variations. I even planned to have a dwarven face for the entrance, which has lava for its eyes, but I had no proper lava farm in episode 1, so this will have to wait for later. And here we are at our time travel sequence, because after I built this entrance, all the things that you've seen in episode 2 happened. So if you haven't seen this one yet and you don't want to spoil you right now, then I definitely recommend checking it out before you continue. Don't worry, we'll wait. Okay, enough. Continue! So now that we are back in the present days, I can continue to build the entrance level of the cave base, which needs of course some decoration. I wanted to make the cave look as if there is a mysterious energy in the mountain that is collected by the dwarves and used to enrich their metals. For this reason, I used warp wood as the veins of this strange energy and surrounded it with deep slate to ensure that the power of this mountain energy can't reach to anyone unworthy. For the floor, I went with the good old basalt, because the upper side of this block has a fantastic stone texture which will come in handy for the cave base. You see, this is why I mentioned it being very useful to spawn in a basalt delta in the nether last episode, because we will need enormous amounts of basalt. In the end, I placed down some warp fences with chains hanging down from them in order to place some lanterns there later on, but at this point I went out of materials, which is why I decided to begin with the first session of underground terraforming in order to create the actual artificial cave. The whole process took me about 3 hours, and every time my pickaxes were about to break, I either had to trade sticks to my villager friends to repair my tools, or I broke all the coal ores I mined with Silk Touch before with my Fortune 3 pickaxe in order to get XP from there, and to smelt the rest of the ores to obtain the experience points for this as well. This is exactly the reason for building the Enderman farm from last episode. But but until I had built this, there were a lot of trading sessions still waiting for me. At least I managed to get the first digging session done, so that I could build the first shape of the bridge I planned to build inside the cave. But I recognized a huge bottleneck of the building process, because if I wanted to dig out a giant cave and then build up bridges, walls and other stuff, I saw myself in the desperate need of some scaffoldings, and therefore I ventured out into my world to find a bamboo jungle biome, which only took about an hour to find. I had no huge amounts of strings, but I had enough to craft a decent amount of scaffoldings, which will make building the whole thing much easier. So the never-ending story of me digging huge amounts of stone, gravel, dirt and ores, placing these ores like a huge tower, breaking them, smelting them and return back to digging continued. Even though I had my trusty old beacon activated with haste 2 all the time, it still took me about 4 hours to get to the point where I placed blocks again instead of just breaking them all the time. These massive oak pillars are supposed to reinforce the cave in order for the dwarves to be safe for mining. Spoiler alert, one of them is burning down almost entirely when I place some lava for light later on. Oh, poor you dwarves. I even added some more support pillars in a more curved shape, and I really like how those turned out. For the whole cave I chose rather dark materials for the dwarven architecture, because I think these materials are fitting the theme of a mysterious underground dwarven kingdom better than anything else. After this I added a lower floor between the pillars, because this floor is supposed to lead the lava from its source to the dwarven forges and anvils in a future episode, which definitely isn't already planned. No. Ending up with building these wooden pillars also marks the end of the huge terraforming session, and the first module of our cave base is now looking like this. To prepare further steps of building, I had to travel to the nether once again to gather up a whole shulker box full of warped wood, as well as a fair amount of new basalt rock. Last but not least, I also dug down further in the cave to farm more deep slate to have enough for the future of this project. With all the materials collected, it is finally time to start building again. I began with the lower floor in order to build myself up slowly but surely without having to return over and over again. So I tried to complete specific parts of the module before moving on to the next one. After completing the design for the lower railing, I continued to figure out where exactly to put the posts for the bridge above my head before I tried to design them a little more instead of being just bare deep slate brick pillars. I used a variety of different block types to adjust the shape of the bridge post a bit more in order to fit the rather detailed theme of the cave. One of my best friends at this state of the building was the stone cutter, because I saved a huge amount of materials with this fantastic and very underrated block. I really do recommend you to use the stone cutter more often while building. It really saves a lot of farming time. However, after completing the bridge post design, I came up with a pretty nice looking connection between the posts in order to provide them with some more stability, and I also used the connections between to hang up some lanterns. With that being done, our bridge is now looking like this, and I really like the way this is coming together, even though we still have a lot of work ahead. Now I simply had to continue the design of the bridge, and I did this until I came out at the entrance again. I used a simple combination of deep slate variations together with some black stone for even darker contrast. All the clean and rather bright stone the cave consisted of wasn't fitting the theme I imagined for the cave base, and so I also decided to remove the floor at first and replaced it with the mentioned upper basalt block texture, which is looking absolutely amazing and much better than the stone. I even textured the floor with more deep slate and cobbled deep slate stairs. I wanted the inner core of the mountain to look like it would not only consist of the standard stone, but also out of veins of darker stone types, which are supposed to be the veins of the strange energetic matter, which could be some sort of mana, I guess. If you're having an idea of what this strange energy could be called as, feel free to also write this down in the comments right next to your name suggestion for our kingdom. So after I completed texturing the floor, I traveled to the nether again to collect some lava buckets so that I was able to build a small lava farm at the bottom of the cave, because as one of the main light sources I plan to use lava flowing out of the walls here and there, as well as the mentioned lava stream on the lower level of the cave. I placed down the cauldrons, continued the work on the lower railing, and after some minutes I could fill in the first buckets of lava, which will definitely not be converted to obsidian at any point of time during the further building process. No. Having this temporary lava farm down here grants me the opportunity to actually use this lava as an element of design, and so I began to design a decorative wall element to cover up the blank northern wall of the cave. Once again I used the warp wood coming out of the bottom of this wall, because I plan to add another module behind this wall in the future, where I want to create the source of the mana in order to spice up the location with more lore fragments. In general, the design for the wall element is a pretty simple one. In the base we have the raw look of the cobblestone in combination with basalt blocks, which are replaced by deep slate tiles further up, and of course I couldn't resist adding more of the supporting dark oak pillars, only this time in a slightly smaller scale. All these single elements are in front of some lava falls, which are again covered up by deep slate. Maybe we could add another fragment of lore to this world that concerns the way deep slate is treated in the dwarven kingdoms. I would absolutely love that. And at the bottom of the northern wall I even added a big dwarven face statue, which is releasing the lava stream into the cave. I really like these kind of details, and I'm really looking forward to add more of those in the future. Next up, I decided to do the same thing I did with the floor, only with the ceiling of the cave, and at this point at the latest, the scaffoldings were a great help for me. I managed to construct a scaffolding platform so that I had no worries about falling down all the time. First off, I replaced the stone with basalt again, before I began to add some more basalt pillars hanging from the ceiling like stalactites in order to make the cave look like it's not entirely artificial. Again, the texture of the basalt block came in very handy for the ceiling, and this small step on the road to the completed project adds a lot of atmosphere to the cave. The ceiling was looking like this at this point, and designing it like this also allowed me to cover up some hard edges like from the entrance or the northern wall, in order to make everything look a bit more coherent and built into the mountain. One thing that was still bothering me was the left side of the cave, which was still pretty bright due to the stone. I did not want to remove the entirety of the normal stone, because only the core of the mountain contains the mysterious mana, and therefore not the entire stone has to be basalt or blackstone. Instead I decided to add some smaller veins of deep slate, basalt and blackstone that surrounded some unnecessary mana stripes. These mana stripes were built again of warp wood, as you can see, and I'm very happy with the outcome for now, because we still are not deep enough into the underground to build everything around the cave with darker stone types. This is probably something that follows in the future modules. For now I had to do another session of basalt farming in the nether, and due to me removing all the basalt around my nether portal, I created a great spawning platform for magma cubes, which I could probably use to get some frog lights later on. But for now I only needed enough basalt once again, and after I gathered up enough of it, it, I also began the search for some soul sand patches, because in order to fit the dark theme of today's project, I decided to go for any soul light variants like soul campfires or soul lanterns, even though they emit less amounts of light. So I spent the next 2 hours adding small improvements to the cave, such as some proper light elements for the bridge using campfire. With those, I even mixed in some spruce wood into the texture of the bridge in order to show that everything was still built by dwarves who are real masterminds in handcrafting and wood constructions. To be on the safe side in terms of monsters spawning all over dark areas in our cave, I also hang up some soul lanterns from the ceiling here and there, and while I was doing so, I always watched my F3 statistics with the block light level, because as you might know, monsters only spawn at a light level of total 0, and this is what I tried to avoid with the hanging lanterns. One thing I also had to keep in mind is that monsters could also spawn on the blocks of the left custom wall I've made. To avoid monsters from spawning there as well, I hid some soul lanterns behind stone stairs, and later on I even added some smaller lava streams flowing out of the custom wall. Lighting up the wall that way spawn proofs the whole thing without adding too much light sources, which could have looked a little bit odd. So now the first module of our new Dwarven Kingdom is looking like this. I would say in terms of getting sidetracked, this is a perfect example for it, if you keep in mind that I just wanted to build a villager trading hall at first. But I am very happy with the progress we have achieved so far today. Speaking of progress, when I added the small improvements and some decorative elements to the cave, I also put some lava buckets behind the wall in the entrance area. And you know, lava must be surrounded completely with solid blocks in order not to heaten up certain objects in the area, such as giant wooden pillars. Unfortunately, I haven't seen that there were some gravel blocks behind the lava, which is why one of the wooden dark oak pillars was able to burn down almost entirely without me even noticing. Well, I'm gonna fix this later, I promise. However, in the meantime of the barbecue behind my back, I replaced the remaining stone walls with basalt to create a boundary around the module so that I could extend this cave step by step. This was especially important to me because otherwise the whole project would have felt incomplete, and so I have the opportunity to make a clean visual cut for today's episode, and the other modules can be built in future episodes. So, with all these steps being completed now, there is only one ugly stone wall left in the cave, which is kinda like the actual core of today's video, because this wall will be transformed into a giant fort for all my trusty villagers. So I guess you could call this fort the actual trading hall, even though I won't build the actual trading hall setup today. Man. I really got sidetracked. But of course, this is not preventing me from building the fort, and in order to fit the scale of the wall perfectly, I planned out the entire thing in a creative copy of the world, and I tried out a lot of different styles and designs, and I stick with the overall block palette of the cave so far, which means that I mainly used variations of deep slate, basalt, blackstone, and of course some soul lighting elements. The base of the fort is going to be the home for a smithing and forging level, where the dwarves invent new constructions for mining or extending the cave, which will be built of course in a future episode. The upper level is supposed to be the actual trading hall, where I plan to hold every type of enchanted book trade, every tradable building block variation, as well as an OP Fletcher trading area, because these guys really need a special place in my world. Every progress you have seen so far was only possible thanks to my trusty Fletcher friends, so I especially need to dedicate myself to them and their area. After designing the whole thing in my creative world, there was only one thing left to transfer it into my hardcore world, namely to place the schematic and build it up block by block. And here we go. Wow, look at this, my friends. I am really proud of today's progress in the world, and I hope the villagers appreciate the work I did to build a proper home for them. I would say the only way to find out if they value the overall effort is to prepare every single one of them to move into their brand new fort. Therefore, I set up a small minecart track to drive them over to the cave. Yes, I would say they look really grateful and very happy about having a blank and probably pretty cold room in a dark cave without any signs of sunlight, fresh air, and surrounded by caves with hordes of zombies. Perfect! We are almost done with today's project. One last thing I wanted to show you is the entrance, which was ironically designed at last. In general, I simply added some deep slate variations again, textured the floor and the ceiling as well as the walls. Thinking of some future modules being built, I added 2 giant chains hanging from the ceiling in the entrance area, which are probably going to hold huge versions of the soul lanterns, I guess. But all of these great concepts and ideas have to wait until the next episodes. I would say we end today's episode with the entrance gate again, which finally receives the dwarven face statue with the glowing lava eyes that I announced at the beginning. If you have made it this far, I quickly wanted to thank you. Thank you for supporting me and the channel. Playing Minecraft and creating content from it really is the most exciting part of my life so far, and I enjoy every single second of it. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I promise you guys, this was just the beginning. So now, without further delays, thank you all for watching. Enjoy some beauty shots in the end, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.